Well, thanks everybody for jumping in. Super excited about the crew that came together, and maybe we'll give it one more minute here. I see at least three connecting audio. Cool. Hey, Christina. Hey, Steve. Uh, just getting rolling. Thanks again. Yeah, excited about the discussion. CLab Pulse, I think most here are aware, but this is just a sort of monthly opportunity to uh, connect folks, share updates, talk all things both Colorado, but also evolving work nationally and globally when it comes to sort of decentralized education and the future of education and employment. So, as always, have a ton to unpack. Want to run through some updates really quick because we do have a heavier panel than usual. I just kind of did a sort of shot out in the dark to the 10 or so folks that I know do ecosystem level work, and had about 6 of the 10 respond. So we got a packed panel, but want to get through some updates so we can get right to that conversation. Real quick, I see at least a few new faces and names. If anyone wants to just do a quick introduction and say hi, certainly want to give room for that. Or if anyone just wants to do a reintroduction, and we'll save those that are here on the sort of ecosystem panel. We'll save that for the second half here. But anyone new that wants to say hi.
I can start. My name's Ellie Gemma Groover. I'm a data trust lead with Bright Hive. And so I've worked closely with Matt Stevens over the years on the Colorado Data Trust. And so really happy to be here to listen in today.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. Yeah.
And this is Jen Brianis. I'm the project manager at Credential, and Jen put this in the chat, but we work closely with Michael at CDHE on integrating their data with our credential registry. So just excited to be here to listen and learn today.
Awesome. Welcome. Thanks for joining, Jen. All right, let's keep moving here. So wanted to give a couple high-level updates on just CLab and some of the state agency work. Michael, I'll probably leave it to you and Bitsy maybe. If you'd like to share a few things up front, you can, or if you want to save it and sort of do it as part of the ecosystem chat, you can do that as well. One thing I wanted to mention on the back of ETH Denver, which was sort of the last big event that we supported and gave an update on last month. Out of that was sort of born this idea of a Colorado Jam incubator. So I'll share in the chat just a little blog post about it. But basically, a lot of the innovation and some of the products and interesting things that came out of that event as a state, and I think largely through OIT and the governor's office, there's going to be a sort of concerted effort to continue to incubate some of those ideas, mostly looking to affect state government in some way. So just know that it's early, but there's I think pretty interesting momentum to continue the work that came out of ETH Denver. Any other comments or thoughts when it comes to ETH Denver? I know a few folks were at least tied in at the edges to some of that, but excited about how that might progress. I don't think I see anyone from OIT. Doesn't look like it.
And Taylor, I might just jump in and say, for my 2 cents for whatever it's worth, it was really cool to use that technology platform, whatever it was, where we could walk around within the conference center and really gave that immersive experience. So that was the first time I've done anything like that. So that was really cool.
Yeah. And there's this irony of jumping back into Zoom after spending time. It's called Gamer Jibe was the platform, but a lot of work went into making it really immersive. Pretty cool experience. And that'll, from what I hear, they'll continue to sort of iterate on using that space for next year too. It'll hopefully be sort of a hybrid in-person and virtual event, but I think there was enough success using it. So Colorado Jam Incubator, that's in motion, and we'll try to keep our eyes on sort of some of the projects that get filtered through that. Wanted to share that we're sort of in early discussion around exploring the Learner Credential Network, which sort of has been incubated by IBM and Walmart, but a number of folks have been tied into that project for a while. So have had some early discussions, and we'll have something of a proposal back, what it might look like for the state of Colorado to be involved in one way or another in the LCN, which is sort of a blockchain-based network approach that IBM's sort of been incubating for the last couple of years. So more to come on that, but we're excited to at least sort of explore what that might look like. The last quick thing I wanted to share, and I know both Bitsy as well as Spencer Ellis, who I think might pop in late, but they've been working a bit on this new bill, HB 201002, around acknowledging work-based experience. And so I don't have nearly the expertise on it that Bitsy, you probably do. Do you want to share anything, some of your work, or again, can also filter it into the chat later?
Sarah, I don't. I think probably Michael has a lot more to share around all of this than I do. He's been at it for a long time. I'm consulting with the state on WBL, and I'm doing a study on their current practices around prior learning and how that's working around the state. But essentially, it's building toward that credential crosswalk system that makes more sense. I'm also doing a lot of work with New York, SUNY, on a credentialing ecosystem that ties into all of this same stuff. So yeah, save it for later.
Cool. Awesome. So any other just high-level community updates that anyone wants to share? Again, thanks for the panelists that joined. We're trying to get there. I want to get there as quick as we can. But any other just broad community updates from anyone?
I'll just hop in and plug the IEEE work again, and I'll put it in the chat, the working group website and the progress we're making. But it's a monthly meeting focused on the interoperable learner records. And so the last meeting, we've got an open source base doc that we're working off of, and it's a lot of the work we're building from is the W3C verifiable credentials and the EDU verifiable credential work. So this last meeting was focused really around, we started to get into some of the nuts and bolts around the actual payload and what that's going to look like, and the crosswalk between some of the disparate parts. So it was a very tech heavy conversation, but we have got a pretty steady group of about 45 to 50 that are showing up weekly and contributing to the conversations and discussions. So a lot of exciting work happening there. And if you are interested in being involved or even reviewing some of the stuff that's happening, again, I'll put the link in the chat and you can head over to the site. If you want to join the listserv, just keep up to date with the info as it comes out. We can share that too. But I know Simone is on the call here today, and he's been a part of some of the conversations, and yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, all things sort of open standards are evolving in real time rapidly. I say rapidly as far as sort of standards go. In fact, I wanted to share, this is a pretty interesting timeline that was, and this isn't meant to be a selfless promotion for my own Twitter handle here, but it's where I shared the image. But looking at sort of the ecosystem of verifiable trust standards, and it's, it is a long process to, have standards evolve to the point of maturity where it really is accepted and sort of gets the full stamp from some of these broad standards organizations. So I think by way of, some of these standards taking 5 to 10 years often, we're seeing things, I think, evolve pretty quickly as far as the standards world goes. So shout out to Manu Sporny. He's with Digital Bazaar, but he was the one that put together that graphic and has been deeply involved in tracking a lot of those standards. Again, I know it's very technical in a lot of ways, but just know that, there's really interesting standards evolving in real time that all have implications in education. And also some of what Colin referenced in the W3C CCG, the Community Credentials Group. There's also this verifiable credentials for education, use cases and modeling sort of working draft. So that might be worth a review. That's sort of a educational flavor that emerged out of the broader W3C work. So continue to support and keep our eyes on that, and make sure that, you know, as any sort of piloting and new infrastructure evolves, that it's you know, has sort of interoperability, student ownership, these core tenets in mind. And I think that's a lot of what's behind some of those standards. So, all right. Anything else, sort of updates or standards that anyone wants to jump in with? Otherwise, we will turn it over to this awesome panel of folks to chat all things mapping of the new learning ecosystem. But any final plugs before we go there? Cool. Awesome. Well, if you guys are okay with it, I might just do a quick rundown and we'll go in order. Maybe a 1 minute sort of intro, who you are, what you're up to, and then we've got a few prompts to just kick the conversation off. I've got this order here, and I'll prompt as we go. But Michael, who's a CDHE, then Catherine Keegan at the Office of the Future of Work, Christina, who's at the U.S. Department of Ed, Bitsy Cohen, who's done a bunch of work and a valuable thought partner that I'm really fortunate to have connected with recently, Raina Tarkenton from Dean, and then Jeff Wasden from previous COBRT, which some folks may know, but is working on a new initiative at a broader level. So Michael, if you want to kick it off first, maybe, yeah, as quick an intro as you can do here, and then we'll get into the chat.
Sure thing. Great to see everyone. Michael Vonte, Senior Director of Research and Data Governance at the Colorado Department of Higher Education. I tend to lean into that second half of my title more and more each day, looking at ways that we can share data and do all of that in well-governed, responsible ways, and being able to really see the value for all Coloradans of what we can glean and the insights that we can have and be equipped with when we are best serving Coloradans, specifically from the higher ed perspective, when they're navigating their education and training next steps. So great to be with you all today.
Awesome. Catherine?
I'm next. All right, cool. I'm Catherine Keegan. I'm the director for the Office of the Future of Work at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. The office itself was established through an executive order from Governor Polis in 2019. And I'm tasked with understanding what the future of work looks like in Colorado, raising awareness about that impact, and trying to identify policy and program solutions that can prepare Colorado workers. So this ties into this conversation quite a bit. And I can say over the course of being part of the learning economy in this group that it pushes my thinking quite a bit. I come from more of a community-based nonprofit management background. And so I think pairing those strategies, sort of grassroots level, thinking of the opportunity with technology and mapping at this large scale to create new pathways for people across the state is really exciting to me. So excited to be here, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. And I had a quick unstable connection, and sorry I prompted Christina early there. Thanks, Catherine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Moscanaris' daughter. I am a fellow in the Office of Educational Technology at the USDOE. Prior to this, I spent 2 years as a Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid. So that is definitely the lens that I bring to this work. My primary work at OET explores how to leverage technology to bridge the education and employment ecosystems. So thinking about within the realm of verifiable credentials, how do we capture the breadth of skills and competencies that the learner worker develops? How do we do this in a way that is interoperable across various education and workforce systems? Looking at how to make these credentials verifiably tamper evident through technologies like blockchain. And then finally thinking about the interface that the user would access these credentials through. So looking at developing standards for a universal wallet.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. And yes, should also say recent thought partner that I'm really glad we've had a chance to connect. A lot of opportunity. Bitsy.
Hi, Bitsy Cohn. I am retired out of the Colorado Community College system. I run my own business in consulting and higher ed. And I was just thinking about my 31st year of working in higher education. Started out at community college for a very long time and ended up working with the system office on some larger state level policy procedure kinds of things. My focus these days has been prior learning assessment credit for adults in the country. I do a lot of work around the country on various things, and I've also started taking a deep dive in this last 18 months or so in the whole credentialing landscape. I'm working on, excuse me, a couple of different projects around that, but the Colorado work is a study essentially to take a look and see what we're doing now, what we have available to students around prior learning credit, and then looking at how we can crosswalk credentials, really crosswalk work-based learning into college credit for students. So it's essentially a research study, but there's an awful lot going on around the state. Michael knows a lot more about the specifics than I do. So I like having these conversations because they help me to have a reason to wake up and get out of the bed in the morning, because they're fascinating to me, and I'm excited about all these possibilities coming down the pike.
Awesome, thanks. And Raina?
Hi everyone, I'm Raina Tarkenton with the Denver Education Attainment Network. I'm new to Dean, but have been in the education space in Denver for a long time. I was with the Denver Scholarship Foundation as the Chief Operating Officer for 10 years prior. And Dean is really working in Denver with our Denver education partners and our state agencies to take a big holistic view of the systems that we have in place to support students through pathways and onto career, and how we can build in on and off ramps that make sense and that are seamless for students, so that the student experience is one that just continues to build through their life, and they don't have to think too much about, because we've done a good job behind the scenes and all of our partners designing it. So that's our focus, and I'm happy to be here today. Hopefully all of the tech speak I'll be able to keep up with. So.
Yeah, and please use the chat liberally. If there's acronyms thrown around, we are guilty often of yeah, using a lot of language that isn't always that accessible. So please just speak up if anything isn't sort of shared in understanding. And thanks Raina. We'll have to just connect more. And Dean has been a supporter since kind of the start and the kickoff of C-Lab. Folks know Therese, obviously, I think here, but yeah, she's been a big supporter, and Dean has been a supporter.
She sends her regards. So
yeah, all the way back to the kickoff. So thanks to Dean. And last but not least, Jeff.
Hey, good afternoon or morning, depending on where you guys are. Having spent most of my life in Colorado and tracking Facebook, I am glad to not be in Colorado after Snowmageddon hit. So hope you guys have dug out. I spent many years running the Colorado Business Roundtable. Before that, some business work, and then my life, it brings me to this topic in education. It's with Littleton Public Schools for many years prior to getting into business, and now out in DC. Running Colorado Business Roundtable for years put me in great work and contact with many of you on this call or your organizations previously. I'm now out in DC, and we're launching State Business Executives, which is really a national organization bringing state leaders across the country to really coalesce the voice of business as we focus on some key policy areas. One of the things I admire and love about each of you on this call is you become really subject matter experts on the areas or fields that you lean into. And I've now gone from an immigration call, an infrastructure call, and now into an education call. And so we focus on a lot of key policy areas, but really focusing again on education, workforce, sustainability, racial equity, diversity, inclusion issues, infrastructure, tax policy. But how do we really get the voice of business engaged in the conversation when you really think about the human capital and that pipeline, ensuring that we're equipped with the talent that we need to continue to drive the innovation, ingenuity, and global competitiveness that American companies demand. So excited to be here and to learn more.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And yeah, I mean, I think we often spend too much time on sort of the supply side. So it's been really great just connecting and keeping sort of the employment and the demand side in mind. It's obviously a full cycle. Both sides matter. Cool. This is perfect. We've still got about 30 minutes here to dig in. I'll probably throw a few prompts and then let the crew here just go at it. and we'll see how it works. This is obviously, usually we're at like 3 or 4, so there's 6, but I know this is a pretty respectful crew, so try to work through points quickly so that everyone can have a chance. So up front, I think most here have an interest in just understanding the broad ecosystem that is education and employment. That means a lot of things to different people. There's a lot of players. There are stakeholders at every turn that we have to keep in mind. When you think about just ecosystem mapping, trying to understand and gain an understanding of what the full ecosystem looks like, the first thing I'd like to dig into is like, what is the practical value, or I'd be open to a dissenting opinion that they're actually we're struggling to find the practical value of mapping what is like an emerging new learning and employment ecosystem. So yeah, open question, but what's the practical value? And given each of your sort of roles and the context you work within, what's important within that? Is it understanding data? Is it understanding actual relational mapping? Is it just being able to discover and find new opportunities through networks? So what's the practical value in your mind, and what matters most in mapping this new ecosystem?
I'll start us off, and others please chime in as well. And some people have heard me use this line before, but to me, from a state agency perspective, and specifically the Department of Higher Education, one of the practical uses of doing things like this has to do with consumer protection and being able to make sure that individuals have as much information as they can get when making a big decision about education, training, and workforce. It makes me go back to my high school economics rememberings in terms of Adam Smith and the free market and the invisible hand and all of that stuff, of being able to remember that individuals, when we're in a free market, when it comes to things like education and where to go get education and training, having perfect information is essential for that market to work well. And right now, individuals and students don't have perfect information. They have a flyer that they might have received, or an email from someone, or my friend of a friend told me about this thing. And so that's what we want to try to do better at, is making sure that individuals have as perfect information as we can get them in terms of what education, training, employment options are available to them, and being able to knit together some of those data sets at the state agency level so that we can provide a robust ROI calculation to help inform that individual. Doing lots of great work with Bright Hive in creating the data trust in Colorado to support that work. And also being able to understand more about all the different options that are available. So we work very closely with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment in managing Colorado's eligible training provider list, or ETPL, and being able to really move in the direction of having our ETPL be the canonical source of education and training opportunities in Colorado. And what are the additional data elements that we add to the collection when we do that work? Working with Credential Engine, being able to publish that information to the Credential Engine registry to increase transparency, and being able to think about ways to add on to those data elements to support things like work-based learning and capturing information like that. So anyway, that's just some of my gut reactions and why I'm excited about this space.
Throwing my pencil around, I can jump in if that's okay.
Yeah, and if folks want to tee up a raise hand, we can also go that route if it feels easier. So feel free if something strikes you. And sorry to interrupt you, Bitsy, but yeah.
No, please.
Raise hand if it helps.
I think that as I'm understanding it, I feel like I'm chasing this, but I like the race. But as I understand it, in the workability of it, there's different projects that I'm working on, and it's kind of bubbling up across the country about different things that are happening. That a lot of what's coming down to, how do we make this operational on the ground? How does it actually work from an institution perspective? Because that's my lens. All these great ideas and all these great projects and pilots, and I mean, there's a lot that's been going on in the last couple of years around all of this. Really what it's come down to is that the systems that are required to make us work well together with all of that in the interest of the student don't really exist very well. Interoperability is a new word in education. I got mine, you got yours, is a little bit more a little bit more normal because of the business model. Although and Michael will tell you too, I think that that's changing significantly across higher ed, and even whether the general public can see it yet or not. But the big thing to me is that the student, first of all, the student doesn't own their own record. The student doesn't have control of it, and they don't have access to it often, or it's a privilege to get access to it, which doesn't seem right. Students aren't recognized for work that they do outside of a credential or a certificate or a degree. And a student can have 115 credits out of 120 credit degree and not get a degree. So the idea that these are the only benchmarks of learning and the only ways that people can prove or show what they know or what they've learned has become really outmoded for us in a lot of ways. And to me, it also is a huge issue of equity, that the people that I see who are not benefiting from non-completing college are the ones who don't have the capital wherewithal, they don't have the cultural wherewithal to hook up to, well, how do I prove that these skills are worth something? How do I show what these skills are that I possess? How do I demonstrate my learning outside of whatever traditional method is? And so a lot of the work that I've been doing in the last couple of years has been around how do we credential that learning, not just create a credential, but to credential all learning counts, to see how a person could walk with that opportunity. And the whole passport, excuse me, I haven't coughed all day, I'm gonna cough now. That the whole, the wallet idea, and it's in even the image of the wallet is revolutionary in terms of how a student could own their own education. And I'm fascinated by that as a possibility. And every single time I think okay, I'm getting a handle on this, and oh, wouldn't this be a good idea? I click on something and somebody's already come up with it and it's halfway down the road already. So this is really, it's totally time. It's all bubbling up like crazy. It's time to I think that the part that I'm most interested in is how we get the humans on the ground who are doing what they do and have been doing it for a long time and have really significant interest in keeping their jobs and honoring their pedagogy and looking at their world and the value in their authenticity, and not look at all of that and say, well, we don't think you're worth much, so we're going to figure out a new way to value what the student gets. Instead of that, to turn it around and say, how do we shift your thinking into understanding that this can be, that the significant learning that's going on can be recognized? So that's my thing. I'm systems. My brain is all about systems. How do you get a faculty person to sit down and agree with 50 other faculty from around the country that a competency associated with their course is speaking the same language as what they speak? That's the practical piece to me. And that, I think, probably more than anything, what this technology is doing, it is creating, if it's not directly, at least through algorithm, this common opportunity for language, that we can load up the language and find things that we recognize, instead of feeling as though we're so different that we can't come together on some kind of a common ground. So I'm very excited about that aspect.
I just wanted to add on to what both Michael and Bitsy have said. Michael's points about figuring out actual return on investment and that consumer protection piece, and then paired with what Bitsy said about people on the ground and equity, I think really hit the nail on the head for me. And I am thinking a lot about how our systems work and how many people are employed within state government and community-based organizations to try to help people navigate this ecosystem, and how they also don't have the wherewithal to navigate it, and there aren't the tools and resources to effectively help people transition, not for lack of trying, but because of the pace of change and how many resources are out there. So that's the other piece I think is really exciting about this, is how can we give our, the helpers in our system more tools to actually do that effectively.
Yeah, Christina, and then maybe Jeff, if you want a final. I love that we can kind of bookend with the employment side in all of this, because again, this is a pretty educational heavy crowd. But either of you final thoughts, and then we'll kind of move on to the next prompt here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just share, I'm thinking about this question of what is the value of mapping from, with 3 different hats on. So, From the federal perspective, I think it's really fundamental to understanding how to direct resources, how to discern among all the actors that could invest in a particular project or coalition, who is best fit to do that, where might it be more appropriate for philanthropy to be leading, et cetera, et cetera. And also to really build a compelling vision. We need to understand what the system looks like and be able to describe that holistically. So then with my former, college administrator hat on, I'm also, thinking about just the intense siloing that happens within higher ed communities in terms of, regional compacts or consortiums, and how that really stifles innovation, and thinking about the potential that, robust dynamic maps can have for just providing inspiration, for sparking conversations between individuals across the United States who might never have heard about each other's work. And then the final hat is as a student and lover of the sociology of organizational change. I think you can't change a system unless you really understand what the map is, who the stakeholders are, what they value, what existing coalitions are strong, where coalitions need support, and also where are the gaps in terms of the experience for the user. And yeah, that connects to a later question, I think, but I'll pause it there.
And Raina, I didn't mean to leave you out of that too. Raina or Jeff, any final thoughts here?
I just wanted to say, I feel like this work lends its culture change. And a great place to start when you're talking about culture change and transformation is mapping, because it takes emotion out of it sometimes for something that can be big and overwhelming. And it starts to just help us see and break down the work and the structures and name things, pain points, gaps, what's working well. And it gets people on the same page. So I agree with everything everyone said, and just say culture change is where this all lands for me. So.
Awesome. Yeah, that fits well with my comment. I think there's a lot of psychological benefits that don't often get addressed. I mean, there's quite real, broad, I think, just mental health impacts potentially by reorienting. And then again, it comes down to broader cultural shifts. So yeah, Jeff, final thoughts here.
It's just interesting, as you mentioned, kind of on more of the demand side, right? How do you recognize, validate, and assign value, right, for these competencies and skills that people bring to the table? How do you ensure quality? And how are employers signaling those kind of demands and needs to the training providers? And I think this is why the interest from our side of the work that you guys are doing is really exciting, because I think it starts to create bridges for employers to be able to really start to understand who their future workforce is, how you connect with them, what skills they bring to the table, that background with, and that really holistic approach that you can start to get a better piece of who they're coming. I've always laughed at the debate that's always between the technical skills and the soft skills, and we always debate which one's more important. I think you're starting to see a way that really starts to minimize that conversation around which one's more important, but to recognize that they're all important, and that what every individual worker brings to the table matters, as long as we've got a way to quantify and value that work. So it's exciting.
Cool. Thanks. Any final thoughts from anyone? And I might lump these last two. I see we had a few other folks join, so I also want to make sure we have time to just open it up to the broader crew here. Any final thoughts on sort of practical application, or just sort of how mapping fits into your current work? Cool. Yeah, and a plus one, Raina. I like this idea of this work in some ways pulling emotion out, sort of depoliticizing. I mean, right now, just anything that can sort of unite and find means of creating common ground. I think, and I think work like mapping an ecosystem that is more or less just taking inventory, taking stock of what exists, and creating connections is important and does do that. So So let's actually kind of lump these last two. So um, uh, take either approach you'd like. Either challenges, just talk about the barriers that exist right now to do this work, and this there's a few folks I've chatted with a lot that are working towards. There's no single model of how to do this at a broad level. Certainly at a state level, it's really difficult. There's a need right now. Everyone feels it. Like, where is the thing to point to say, oh, this is the landscape. Here it is. I see it all. There's all these disparate pieces. And want to give a shout out to Allison Griffin at Whiteboard Advisor, and actually also Therese from Dean. Spurred a lot of this thinking, and then that led to more conversations with Christina, how the broader sort of DOE could be involved, and then so a lot of interest and a lot of folks that feel like there's this just undercurrent of a need for understanding the full ecosystem, but it's not here, or at least it doesn't feel like it is. So why is that the case? What are the challenges right now that exist to make that happen? And maybe as a follow-up to that, if you were to be given a blank check and all the resources in the world, what would a tool or a service or a network, what would it look like to truly map an ecosystem? Again, we can kind of take Colorado as a microcosm, but obviously that could extend beyond just any single state. Barriers that exist, or give us your grand plan on like what a solution might be if you had no barriers.
Well, I can jump in and give my 2 cents really quick, and I'll take a whack at both of those questions with one answer. I think one of the biggest barriers that we have seen as we've navigated this landscape has been the lack of the sharing of systems. And I think Bitsy or maybe some of my other colleagues mentioned it, but the systems themselves don't talk to each other, or historically have not. So when it comes between education and workforce, I think what we're doing in Colorado is very exciting, to be able to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're rowing in the same direction as much as we can. I think that's why things like the data trust that we have developed with CDLE and other partners is so powerful and can be really game changing in terms of linking those necessary data to answer some of these questions and provide some of these insights to an individual. And if I had, a magic wand and a blank check, it would be just to kind of lean into all of those processes even more at the state level, and making sure that we're all on the same page, bringing more and more people to that shared data table to realize those use cases. And then also nationally, thinking about what does it look like in terms of our federal partners being able to share data more and connect data across the wealth of information, not only at the state level, but at the federal level. And so I think that the opportunity is there, and those would be some things that I would love to see.
I'll build on that, and just to pick up on Michael, your first point, I think sometimes the systems at one institution don't even work with each other. So the layers of the challenge are deep. So some of the questions I noted down in terms of barriers, who is the map for? How do these types of maps stay dynamic? How are they designed in a way that's participatory? How are they designed in a way that's accessible to different types of users? And then thinking on the other side of that, if I had that blank check, I would want to buy more time for this work so that we could really engage users more. I think there's such always a tension between taking an action and trying to move full steam ahead, but thinking about also who is getting left behind in that process. I think oftentimes we provide guidance on things that maybe no one is asking for guidance on. And so just how do we really center the experience of the learner worker as we're building these maps?
Let me just kind of jump in, Christina, you really triggered a thought when you mentioned, who this is serving and the importance of equity for all. And I think We have so many underserved, underrepresented populations that are being left behind in the workforce, and removing the biases and recognizing the training and skill set that they bring to the table is critical today. And I think it's really a moonshot challenge of our lifetime to really figure out how, when you think about opportunities to develop sustainable living wage work for all employees, where they feel validated, respected for their contributions, where they value what they bring to the table and have a place to hang their hat. And there's been a lot of studies. I think Arthur Brooks really did one about the value of work and what that looks like and means to people, and the compassionate heart. And I think understanding to how we ensure that all students have access. And it's interesting, as you talked about the dynamic aspects of this and ensuring that it lives and breathes and maintains that. It's also ensuring that it includes, again, that reach to all areas, all levels, all populations of our society, that they have equal access. And I think that's something that I'm extremely pleased to see this national focus really being placed on this issue. It's long overdue, and I'm excited to see this work continue.
Yeah, I share the sentiment that it is, the work of our time, of an entire generation. I don't think it's overstating it to say it's, sort of the existential issue of our time. And I mean, I don't think we mentioned this too much, but Learning Economy Foundation in a lot of ways is working towards really solving SDGs 4 and 8, which is quality education and economic opportunity for all. And that's no small task. I mean, but this, to me, these are the conversations and all the work that's going on. Like that's how to get there. So I think you're spot on, Jeff. I think we can all do a better job of not underselling how important it is. Other thoughts or barriers? Yeah, barriers, or lay out your grand vision. And we can get big and bold. I'm talking blank check and endless resources here. What would it look like?
This is Bitsy. I'm going to jump in. I love the idea of a blank check, but I don't know, what I'd do with this project. I know what I would do with in my house. I think that the thing about a lot of what I've dealt with in my entire career that is becoming less and less impactful and less necessary is that whole business case for higher ed, in the way that we have done the business of education in our country for a long time. I think that we are, I have this sense of bubbling up out of all of that and coming up into a different place where, if that's still happening, it's going to be happening behind us anymore, instead of being so much in control of what we've been and who we are. And I see the thing about this that I think is most impactful is that it's owned by the consumer. That this idea that education owns knowledge and education owns learning has needed to be flipped for a long time to the idea that the learner owns their own significance. They should be able to own their own authentications, so that the external viewpoint of what's valid in terms of their learning, really, it should be about who they're bringing that learning to. If they're bringing it to an employer, is it valuable to the employer? If they're bringing it as a parent, is it valuable to the child? We undervalue so much about what we learn in every day, that this is something that changes that opportunity. I could go off too far on that one. I do see it as an opportunity. I don't see it so much as a barrier anymore. I really feel like that stuff is it's becoming quieter in some ways, because it's just not going to sustain. It can't sustain itself anymore. We're growing out of that so rapidly. And I think this last year has been probably the biggest indicator of that, because of the way that education was forced literally out of the classroom, and the way that every paradigm wasn't just, if you've ever been involved in higher ed, it takes about a year to change anybody's mind, maybe, right? And what I saw from 1 week to the next was incredible. And it wasn't just, holy moly, look at what we're having to do, but also look at how well we're doing it. That there was a huge amount of stress and tension for everybody, but I'm stunned by how many faculty took their entire classes and put them online in the space of 2 weeks. And a lot of the people who did that were people who had never dealt with the idea of writing an outcome and a competency that would lend itself to instructional design, which is a completely different bear than standing up in front of a classroom and teaching with your talents. And so that shift in thinking has created this nice disruption around what people think is important or what they think they know. And it's created an opening, I think, for this kind of idea to say that you were put into a position where you had to significantly redefine your teaching and outcome strategies, and also your assessment strategies, what's important to test, what isn't. And then you're also coming out at the end of this with some satisfaction around, I did the best that I could, or I did a good job and I've delivered a good product to these students, but it's completely different from anything I've ever delivered before. And it changed the way that I think people think about that stuff. So this is a way of saying, okay, now that we're changing the way we think about that, let's look at how we create a record for the student to move with wherever they go, that also then communicates that learning in a way that's significant to them no matter where they are. And I think I see it as a huge opportunity. If I had all the money in the world around this, I would spend it on creating the vision for this to the people who are doing the work so that they can connect to it. I don't think it's an idea that people are going to say it's a bad idea. I think it's more that they're going to say, how am I supposed to access this? How do I become part of that? That's where I'd put my money.
Yeah, I love the optimistic framing. I think you're right. You know, even a year ago, it would have been challenging to start to really talk about mapping the ecosystem because everything was changing. It was very strange and dynamic. I lean into this idea of infrastructure inversion a lot, and I think we're at that point where we're seeing a clear inversion of existing infrastructure when it comes to education and work, and so now is the time to start to map that ecosystem, because I think what gets built now will be, you know, a multi-generational, you know, structure. Yeah, other thoughts, but maybe 2 or 3 minutes here, and then want to at least leave the last 10 to open up the conversation, as well as share some exciting things that are coming. I want to plant the seeds here at the end. There are really exciting efforts underway that we're hopefully going to be able to support. So, any final thoughts on these last couple prompts from folks?
I know that I'm bummed that I didn't come in when this was scheduled. I thought it was supposed to start at 12:30, and I don't even know what amazing stuff I missed.
All the best stuff was up front. Sorry.
Clearly. You know, I heard things about mapping, or heard things about how, you know, y'all are trying to connect, I think, what's happening in education in the classrooms and the way that education is being defined to the ways that employers are defining what they're looking for. And I'm loving hearing about that. It's something that I've been working on off and on for a little over 11 years. It brought me to CU into the physics education research department. It you know, gave me an opportunity to work with numerous different universities and to eventually like see some of the places that are barriers to our ability to merge the nature of education with the nature of the new tools that are around. Right, so the nature of education to me, I think this will sound like something y'all are down with, is that it's a dynamically stable learning network, right? It's comprised mostly of people, but also of the tools and methods they use for collaboration, right? And discovery. I mean, like, we're nothing if we don't work together. That's what makes us awesome, and education supports that. So that to me is the nature. And so it's changed, you know, when we went from just apprenticeships through print, so that now we could go across generations with our ideas, even if somebody fell off a cliff, then to universities, and they were around running the show basically when computers came along. And so the market was focused on where the money would go. And if you wanted to make money with education technology, you weren't going to challenge the universities. You were going to build something that worked for them. It was going to emulate it a little bit or extend it a little bit. And so most of what we've done with technology in the creation of the 4 LMSs that are used in 90% of all classrooms in the world, right, has just been to extend a nice solid part of our education system. If we want to do something big, we're going to have to look at how the web and computers fit into the actual network that is education, not how they fit into one of the little pieces, right? And so for me, like, I mean, you gotta make kind of just a totally different structure, but you can get there pretty fast and easily while still providing quality content if you recognize, I'll repeat this again, there are 4 learning management systems used in 90% of the classrooms that use learning management systems. You talk about the whole ecosystem and all these millions of different things, from the different standards, LTI, SCORM, XAPI, Common Cartridge. There's a larger list of standards than there are of LMSs used in 90% of all classrooms. So the LMS, love it or hate it, that is your shortcut into the entire ecosystem. But the best thing about LMSs is that they all use, these top 4 especially, use very similar APIs, these RESTful APIs. So when you want to gain access to what's in the classroom, you don't ask teachers to fill out a survey and email you something. You log in as an administrator. I did this at Regis, and you just pull all of everything, just all of the content that's in all of the classes, right? So if you're like, well, we wanted to go out and find one of a million different websites that provides a million different types of content that could be used in a million different situations, no, just pull something from the LMS that you're using, that the school next to you is using, that was deemed good enough for their students. You don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to start from things that were made by people you don't know. So I would give a lot of I would start something that's just literally it's the statewide multi API for connecting to all of the LMSs, and then just work with their existing sharing systems and just start blowing stuff around.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of education as a network of connected people and systems like that. In the end, that's really what it is. And there's an emergence of distributed networks on the other end. They're kind of one and the same. And so, I love the idea of, and folks know that we also push this idea of the internet of education. And, that is more or less what some of this work is working towards. What does it mean for a single network to sort of, exist at a higher level that is education? So anyway, thanks. And Edmund, if I think you'd be interested, if you haven't read Zach Stein, Education in a Time Between Worlds, just given the little bit you just said, I think it'd be a book you'd really appreciate. And Zach Stein's writing is not for everybody, but I really enjoy it. So,
can you say the book title again? I'm sorry.
Education in a Time Between Worlds, I think.
Great.
It's his latest book. Other thoughts, Raina, Catherine, anyone else? And then we'll.
If that's okay, I have a question for the guests today.
Yeah.
So, considering that this is a blockchain enthusiast group, I am eager to find out from the educators, where do you see the role of including blockchain in traditional education curricula, and how do we best prepare the workforce for the high demand of blockchain jobs?
I'll hop on that because I'm a K-12 educator and administrator and have been for 15 years. And one of the areas I kind of got niched into, not that I got a classically trained undergrad degree in computer science, but I loved using tech and I love playing around with devices, and just naturally that led to like, oh, he's the tech guy. Oh, he can teach computer stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, but I can play around with things just like anybody else can. And so to me, it's having that curiosity and that open-mindedness in even our youngest kids to try stuff and see what happens and play in software development environments and use Scratch and use Python and do all this stuff, so that by the time they get to high school, they can think about computer science as a viable like content area or subject that they can continue to learn more about. And naturally it'll lead to all these other languages and all these other platforms. And I think blockchain is a part of that. And so to me, from the K-12 side, it's having exposure and opportunity for kids to do this as a daily part of their school experience. Reading, writing, and math. Our science teacher loves to say that math is the language of science. And that is science, computer science, natural science, every science you can think of, math underpins all that. So I think opportunity for kids to engage is a good place to start.
Yeah, it's it's a wild west, which can, I think, be scary. But I agree, man. I have had a ball the last few days just diving down the NFT rabbit hole, and all that is evolving around just distributed systems. It is, but you just got to go play and tinker, and yeah, the more we can instill that in kids that it's okay to just go and with guidance, with responsible folks around them, because part of the nature of the sort of permanence of blockchain, there are financial connections that can cause problems. There are folks losing their lunch because they do get just reckless and dive down that rabbit hole a little too quick, a little too deep. But yeah, I love that, Colin. I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
And I'll just add in there, I think in terms of, the higher education space and how students can get those skills and get that information on blockchain to be prepared for the workforce and a whole host of opportunities. In some ways, I see that as another in for work-based learning. If there are opportunities where an individual can play around with some of these things, or to be able to do something on their own time, or maybe it's a professor integrating something into their curriculum, but being able to provide academic credit to individuals who are doing that exploration. And I think that's one of the things that is important to us when we talk about work-based learning, is and prior learning assessment, being able to find those ways to provide academic credit for that exploration. And so, as Bitsy well knows, it can be hard to get faculty to insert something into their curriculum and to be collaborative with them. Those things is something we always want to do. And being able to provide those other avenues for students to get credit, I think, is very important.
Cool. I know we're down to the last few minutes. Often folks hang, and I'm happy to. And if folks want to hang after the hour here and keep rolling, if you have the time, certainly welcome to. Wanted to share a few final links. One is an interesting model around this sort of mapping that's been done by Holland IQ, Strat Education. They've obviously done a lot of work here, and their ideas around new learning ecosystems. That YouTube video, I think, is really a good primer, just from a sort of theoretical level on some of this. And then the last thing I'll say real quick, and then maybe turn it over. I see we've got some others, Steve and Aaron, Spencer, other folks. Tara, good to see you. If anyone wants to jump in and ask a final question, please do. But what I will say is, one, there is definitely momentum in Colorado. Again, there's conversations, I think, at many levels to figure out how to do some of this work. I mentioned Allison Griffin at Whiteboard, her work around Boundless Potential, which is a newsletter worth the weight in gold. There's a new Colorado Trustees Network that I think is vital in some of this aligning across leadership. And then again, also, yeah, Bright Hive. We're really excited about potential in partnership with Bright Hive. They've been working on a sort of ecosystem explorer tool, and it has support from a number of funders nationally, and of course with Christina and other folks at the DOE also having interest here. I do think there's good alignment around starting to create very tangible, what a colleague calls clicky things. I think we need some clicky things, things we can actually interact with and see in action to see what's possible. So, yeah, any final thoughts from other folks that want to chime in? And again, I know we're at the hour, so thank you again for those that have to drop, but we'll hang on for anyone that can stay.